shall start today's event, and you will soon deliver your opening remark. Peace be upon us all. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all well today. Good morning to those of you who are joining us from the Europe. And we would like to thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance in this FGD. This FGD is our third FGD of our 4 FGDs. In this third FGD, we will discuss about how we provide incentive to those participants who are participating in the voluntary ETS scheme. And we will also discuss about the effect of carbon tax to that scheme. Ladies and gentlemen, this FGD has an interpretation feature. So you may also utilize the interpretation feature. Please activate your interpretation on the bottom right in your Zoom screen, and you can select your own channel. There will be 2 sessions. The first session, we will have the moderator, Ms. Cecilia Tam. She will talk about the lessons learned of ETS implementation and how we provide incentive in the piloting phase, and then carbon tax impact to the ETS. And second session, there will be open discussion. I will be your moderator in that session. We sincerely hope that more Indonesian stakeholders to be more active, because we have the presence of our international experts. They may offer some insight and input in the second session. Okay, we will soon start our FGD. And we would like to invite Mr. Wanhar to open this session, and will be continued by Cecilia in her opening remark, and we can continue to the first session. The time is yours, Mr. Wanhar. Thank you very much, Pak Bati. I hope you can hear my voice clearly. Yes, sir, it is very clear. Peace be upon us all. Ms. Cecilia Tam, please allow me to deliver the welcome remark in Bahasa Indonesia, because most of the participants are from Indonesia. The Honorable Ms. Cecilia Tam, the SAFIM Program Team Leader from OECD, and also Ms. Sarah Muarif, the Head of Environmental and also Climate Change from IEA, and also Mr. Kira McNamara, Senior Analyst from IAE, and also the distinguished Ms. Singtong, Senior Researcher of Institute of Energy and Environment and Economy, Tsinghua University, as the speaker for today's FGD as well. Good morning to Francesca Mani and also Mr. Paul Dawson, as well as distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are the participants of today's FGD. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we would like to say our gratitude to our Almighty God. Due to His blessings and guidance, today we are all able in March 4, 2022. We can gather today in healthy condition in our focus group discussion. Our theme is incentivizing participants in voluntary phase of ETS scheme and the impact of the carbon tax in ETS. First, we would like to thank you very much. Thank you, Clean Energy Finance and Incentive Mobilization, or SAFIM. It is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and the International Energy Agency, IEA. Thank you so much for your support so that we can establish our FGD today. And as we all know that the government of Indonesia has ratified Paris Agreement under Law number 16 of 2016 on the ratification of Paris Agreement in the framework of Convention for Climate Change. The GOI has a very strong commitment to reduce the GHG emission as written in the National Determined or the NDC by our own ability 26%, 41% with the support of foreign governments. And in 2021, the Ministry of Energy would like to pursue carbon trading to improve the reduction of GHG emission to achieve our own NDC. So the cap of our GHG for coal and also to do MRP in the inventory for our GHG emission and also to improve the awareness of business actors in carbon pricing, specifically in the cap and trade and offset scheme. In 2021, the GOI also stipulate the Presidential Regulation of 2021 on the providing of the economic value of carbon that will be implemented in the national level and also the controlling of GHG emission in the national level. We also have stipulated law number 7 of 2021 on the harmonization of taxation. In our trial, before the stipulation of the presidential regulation, we have the implementation, but it is in line with the respective law. And praise be to God, during the trial effort in 2021, we have achieved some participation of 40% out of total candidates of participants. So to support the emission cap and also carbon trade and also carbon tax, specifically for the coal-fired steam power plant. In Indonesia, we are also pursuing a finalization of the subordinate law on the presidential regulation and also our law, our ministerial regulation, law by the Ministry of Environment and also Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, and also regulation by our Ministry of Finance. Specifically for the Ministry of Energy, the Directorate of Electricity are trying to develop our procedure in maintaining economic value of carbon for our power. And we think that we have accommodated input from many experts from Indonesia regarding best practices on ETS scheme or using the EU or UK scheme, and we have adapted how we develop our cap emission and also the allowance and also the brief allocation. And we also provide a possibility to do some tender in our technical approval for our emission. And for your information, April 1st, 2022, the carbon trade and also carbon offset and carbon tax will be initiated in Indonesia. And we once done a trial, so it's only a one-time trial. And ladies and gentlemen, to support our carbon tracks, the Directorate of Engineering and also Electricity under the Ministry of Energy in collaboration with CIFIM, OECD, and also IEA, we would like to develop the carbon tax scheme using FGD, carbon trade scheme using FGD. So we will discuss about our lessons learned during the trial effort. What is actually the challenges, benefit, incentives that can be utilized to improve participation on carbon trade and also possibilities to implement it in other sectors. In today's FGD, we have experts from several countries. They will share with us about the design and implementation of carbon tax and trade, and also the private sector's perspective that will affect the EU ETF that also try to apply the carbon tax. So to prepare the cap, trade, and tax, we try to have further information in developing the cap, trade, and tax in Indonesia. Hopefully, this FGD will inform us, provide us knowledge so that we can implement the cap, trade, and better tax in the future. Therefore, we sincerely hope that all participants can actively participating in this discussion. Once again, we would like to thank SAFIM OECD and also the IEA in the FGD. Thank you so much. Peace be upon us all. Thank you very much, Mr. Wanhar, for your opening remark, and thank you for summarizing or reviewing in general our activities in the previous FGDs and today's FGD. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Cecilia Tam. The time is yours.
Cecilia.
Thank you very much. Dear Pak Wanhar, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here today to welcome all of you to our third in a series of 4 focus group discussions to support the design of Indonesia's emissions trade scheme for the power sector. The discussion today will build on the 2 previous FGDs that were held last year. As Pak Wanhar and Pak Bate had mentioned, the first one looked at different approaches to ETS schemes for the power sector, while the second discussed implementation and technical design elements of ETS. We are pleased to be collaborating with our colleagues at the International Energy Agency on organizing this series of events. And we are pleased to be able to build on the fruitful cooperation between the OECD and the government of Indonesia under the SEFIM program, which is supporting Indonesia's efforts to mobilize domestic and foreign sources of finance to accelerate investments into the clean energy sector. We would like to commend DG Electricity for the development of its emissions trading scheme trial, and to thank Pak Wanhar and his colleagues for this collaboration to support their efforts to develop the ETS for the power sector. And we would like to thank your teams for their support in organizing today's event. I'd also like to thank my colleagues from the IEA, Sarah Moraf and Karen McNamara, for collaborating with us on this series of focus group discussions. I'd also like to thank our international experts for taking the time to share their experience as well as their valuable insights and advice to our Indonesian colleagues. Finally, thank you to all the stakeholders attending today. Your actions will be essential to realize Indonesia's clean energy transition. I encourage all of our participants today to actively join our discussion through different Q&A. You can also raise hands to add into our discussions in our second session. So to begin our first session, we will be discussing how ETS schemes have been implemented in their pilot or early phases, with a particular focus on design elements that can enhance participation in the trading system. During this discussion, we will have country experts, both from China and the EU, share their experience in terms of the design and implementation of these schemes, and highlighting the lessons that have been learned that could be useful in the Indonesian context. The session will also look at how a carbon tax can impact the implementation of the ETS, And we will take questions from participants after our four presentations. So as I mentioned, please feel free to enter your questions into the chat box. You can do this in Bahasa or in English, where interpreters will help us do the translations. With that, I'd like to now invite our first speaker, Pak Bayu from DJK, to tell us a little bit about the challenges that they've seen so far in the pilot phase in terms of increasing participation in the trading. Pak Bayu, the floor is yours.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Cecilia.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cecilia. The Honorable Mr. Director, represented by Mr. Wanhar and also Ms. Cecilia Tam, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, peace be upon us all. I would like to deliver a presentation regarding the carbon trade scheme and also the implementation of carbon tax in the power subsector. Please allow me to use Indonesian language. So this is how we try to describe the GHG emission and the net zero emission in the energy sector. We try to reduce emission firstly by try to improve the growth of our renewable energy or RE. So you can see in our yellow color, our emission is approximately 453.2 million emission, and we need to reduce is approximately 19 million ton by our own effort and also by the effort of other countries, 446 ton. So this is actually the description. This is our strategy to reduce our emission up to 2030. So based on COP26, Indonesia has already some guideline for net zero emission up to 2060 or sooner than that. So our strategy to achieve it are 5 steps. First, we will have a retirement for our coal-fired steam power plant in a gradual manner. Second, acceleration of renewable energy, specifically for solar panel and windmill. And the third is by utilizing more efficient technology. Fourth is trying to encourage electric vehicle. And fifth, smart grid implementation to tackle variable renewable energy or VRE. Next, please. In 2021, we in the power sector tried to do a trial. We did a program, so emission reduction, by using a program called PSBE or the Subroto Award in Energy Efficiency. So under the Director General of Renewable Energy, and we tried this trial because we have some policies or government which supported, namely the government of 2017's regulation and also presidential regulation on the economic value of carbon and also another law in 2019. So we have voluntary period between 2021 until 2024 and mandatory in 2030. And in our mechanism, we try to introduce the cap, trade, and offset concepts. So the cap is actually the upper threshold for emission, and trade is the trade of the difference between the cap with the amount of emission, maximum of 70%, and offset is actually the carbon credit from activities in the scope of ETS to reduce the GHG emission. So we have 3 categories of the coal-fired steam power plant. the one that is above 400 megawatts. So the value of the emission cap is 0.918, and then the coal-fired between 100 until 400 megawatt, the cap is 1.013. So this kind of distribution or differentiation is based on the regulation of the Ministry
the
of
cap
Energy in
is
2020.
the
And also
average value from
we have
2019.
weighted average for GHG
And
emission
this
intensity
is
value in
considering the
2019.
emission quota, and it is
So 70%
for
is for
trading and
trading and
30%
30% is
for
offset.
offset.
We would like to ensure that we are not exceeding the
that's the
cap,
cap.
and we would like to
It's
accelerate the realization of
the
renewable
realization
energy
of
power
the target.
plant. C, we would like to realize the
And this is
NDC achievement target.
Our trial in
So this is what we try to pursue in 2021.
Next. And out of this trial, we have a surplus of around 4.1 million ton of CO2. And this is our result in 2020. And the participants, we have 84 candidates, and during the trial, only 40% joining the trials, and have like 32 power plants in the trials. Okay, next. And this is the results of our trials in 2021. And there are 14 units as buyers, which is 44%, and 18 units as seller, or 56%. And we have 42,000 ton of CO2, and the price is $2 per ton CO2. And the potential is 1.54 billion rupiahs. And the credit carbon is 22,000 tons CO2. And the carbon credit is around 4,500 tons CO2. Okay, next. And then currently we're trying to do this, to make it an obligation. And then these are the legal grounds. The first is the law number 16, year 2016. And then the law number 7, year 2021, is about tax regulation harmonization. And then also we have the government regulation number 46, 2017. And this is about the environment economy instruments. And we also have the presidential decree number 98 in year 2021, and then also the minister's decree number 22 year 2019. And then next. And with these presidential decree number 98 year 2021, we can see that we have this mechanism of the implementation. And then the first is the carbon trade, how the emission trade, and then the emission offset, and then the cap and trade, and then the carbon exchange, and also the direct trading. And we have also the performance-based payment, and then the scope, and we have a carbon tax, and then also other mechanism based on the development and knowledge and technologies set by the minister. And this is the summary of the presidential decree number 98 year 2021. And then the mechanism of carbon trading is regulated here. And then we collaborate with other ministries, and we put the cap based on the technical approval by the ministers, and then the mechanism of the offset and the greenhouse gases. And we have the cap on the GHG. And here, the potential for incentives is below the cap. And then it's done through the offset. Okay, next. And then in our ministry, we're trying to regulate this instrument in more detail, especially in the carbon economy value on the power plant. And the planning is currently we are formulating the ministerial decree on the carbon economy value on power plant, and we hope to implement this soon. And then on the business player, they have to report their emission, especially in their GHG reporting through our Director General, and it will be validated. And the validator and the verificator is independent. And then we have 4 categories for the steam energy power plant.
25 sampai 100 ya.
We have 4 values, like below 25 and then below 100. And then for the electric steam power plant, after 400, above 400 megawatts. And we hope for the latest class, as from 25 to 100 megawatts, will be set or will be regulated based on, it will be at the latest in year 2024. Okay, yeah, if it is already approved. And then for the carbon trading, will be based on performance. It will be calculated based on performance. It will be based on the emission by this, and then it will be after they receive the certificate. And then we also coordinate with other ministries, for example, the Ministry of Environment, and also we work with the business players in this. We also work with the Ministries of Industry, and also it's for our preparation for this regulation, we work with other ministries as well. We also integrate the application so that we can connect with the ScienceSmart and SRN PPI and simple application. Next. Next. And this is the overview related to the SDM decree, the minister's decree, and then we regulate the emission, the GSG emission, and then the mechanism for the approval for the emission technical issues, and also we regulate the mechanism for the emission technical approval as well for the electric power plant. And this is something we would like to implement this year. And in December 2024, we also would like at least until 2024 for the threshold so that we can do this together. Okay, so this is the cycle of our planning related to cap and trade and offset. And we have submitted the monitoring documents and then reporting. And then this is based on the application also. In March, we'd like to launch the verification of the report. And then January and February next year, we would like to do validation and verification. And then also we'd like to submit the approval for the emission technical approval, and then SPC. And then in January, definitely there will be the reporting for the GHG emission. And also in 2023, we will have this emission technical approval. And then 31st of March, next year, we'll have the latest, we have the deadline for the validation and verification. And then from April to December, it will be the trading and offset for carbon trade period. So this is the overview of the implementation and planning related to the carbon economy value. Okay, next. Next. And this is the roadmap for the carbon tax implementation. If they have, if their emission is above that, the one that is regulated, they need to buy from emitter that has emission below the offset. Okay. And then in B, if emitter who produces emission above the threshold but didn't do transaction of trading or offset, and then there will be given taxes related to carbon tax. Okay, and this is the roadmap of the carbon tax. This is our cap and tax. And in this year, last year, 2021, we had this law number 7 on the tax regulation harmonization, and one of which was the carbon tax. And then we had also the presidential decree number 98, year 2021. It's about the carbon economy value. And then also the contribution target that is set nationally. And we also have the development for the mechanism related to the carbon exchange and carbon tax technical mechanism. And we have also the plotting for carbon trading and power plant sector. And then 2022, we have the cap setting for coal power plant. And then we have also the governance related to the cap and tax for the electrical power plant. And we have also the cap and tax, and this is sort of like a pilot. It is, and in 2025, we have the implementation for carbon trading, and this is like full implementation through carbon exchange. And also we have the development of the taxes sector related to tax carbon tax, and we will have the setting for the regulations related to cap and tax for other sectors. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much, and I hope it is beneficial for you. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, Ibu Cecil and Pak Bati, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Bayu, for taking us through the design of the Indonesian ETS during this trial period and outlining all of the different regulations. Now I would like to invite our first international expert from China to share that country's experience. Ms. Qingtong, please, the floor is yours. We're looking forward to hearing about China's experience under their pilot scheme.
Okay, so now can you hear me and also see my sharing screen?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay.
Put it to full
Okay.
screen mode.
Okay. Translate. So can you see? Oh, hey. Hey.
We can see your screen. We can see your slides, but it's not on full screen mode, so it might be a bit small for people to.
Oh, I don't know why. There is a note that your sharing screen is paused, and I don't know why. I just have a try. Sorry. And now can you see my full screen mode?
Not yet.
No. Okay. And now it's still not full screen. And what about
I think it's coming now.
So now you can see my full screen, or not yet?
Not quite yet, but something seems.
Really?
Maybe we just give it a minute.
So maybe. So maybe I have to enlarge my current
Perfect.
screen, and we can see in this mode. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I don't know. Maybe there's some incompatibility between our systems. Sorry. And
No
so, dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Qing Tong. Qing is my given name, and Tong is my family name. I'm from China's Tsinghua University in Beijing, and I'm from the Institute of Energy, Environment, and Economy of Tsinghua University, and my institute are supporting the both the national government and the Beijing municipal government on ETS construction and operation. Actually, the formal construction and operation of China National Uniform ETS is from year 2016 or 2017, but ever before the start and the construction of China National ETS, there were several pilots, and one of the most successful pilot ETS is Beijing Emission Trading Scheme, which is designed by our team, my institute. And now, so it's my pleasure to introduce simply the Beijing ETS. First, we can see the coverage of Beijing ETS. We can see that currently only CO2, only one type of greenhouse gas is covered by Beijing ETS. And there is an expansion of the threshold from 10,000 tons of CO2 per year lowered to 5,000 tons of CO2 per year. And this is in company level, in company level. And from the sectors, we can see the expansion of coverage that ever before, we only have about 40 sub-industries from the power and heat supply sector, the manufacture and some other light industries, and also some are from the service sectors. But now we have almost 52 subsectors now. And from the expansion of scale, we can see that at first, at previous years, Beijing ETS only included less than 500 what we call key emission entities, all to be easier to understand. You can think most of the key emission entities are companies or institutions here in Beijing, and now expanded to more than 900 companies here in Beijing. And we also have the optimization of MRV guidelines, the monitoring, reporting, and verification guidelines. And Beijing has its own local guidelines and also its own online direct reporting system. And now we see the commodities, and we have a major commodity is, of course, the emission allowances. And Beijing's emission allowances are in accordance with, just now I talked, the MRV guidelines. So the emission allowances are composed of 3 parts. The first is the direct energy emissions, and from mostly from combustion, fossil fuel combustion, and 2 cement plant has the what we call the IPPU, the emission from the raw material use. And second, we have indirect emissions from electricity consumption. And the last part is the direct process emission. Oh, sorry, first part, I made a mistake. The first part, direct energy emissions, include the both the fossil fuel and the raw material energy use as raw material, such as the oil refinery and ethylene production. And the third, the direct process emission. Currently, only 2 cement plants are covered by Beijing ETS. So only the cement plant in Beijing are related to involved in the direct process emission, industrial process. And we also permit a little amount of offset. And the offset include first, China certified emission reductions. I think its abbreviation is CCER, and it's maybe it's famous all over the world because some foreign friends asked me about this one. They know this. And the second is our local offset mechanism. And there is a setting of a upper limitation of offset use, only 5% for the priority for self climate change actions and emission reductions. And then we see our method of ETS cap setting. Because I know that in previous phases, EU ETS used the pure top-down method for cap setting. And there were some problems such as over-allocation. So to avoid such problems and to avoid risks, the Beijing ETS used a hybrid method. Firstly, we use some sectoral forecaster to forecast our total amount of sectors, and then we do the allowance trial allocation to enterprises, and using a different method I will talk later in some other slides. So this step from the purple one to the blue one is top-down step, and then we have the bottom-up step from the trial allocation, and it's not the termination, but we have calibration of allocation parameters using some energy conservation statistics and our direct reporting data to do the calibration work. And now Beijing ETS has 3 types of free allocation methodology. The first 2 types are for existing companies. One is based on historical total amount, which is very similar to EU ETS grandfathering technology methodology. And the other is based on historical intensity, and it's similar to the early phase of EU ETS updating method. And we also have benchmarking method for some newcomers of ETS. And now I will talk about the benchmarking allocation. Before, it's mainly for newcomers of ETS, and there are 2 situations for newcomers. The first is a totally new company, what we call legal person here in China. And the second type is an existing company covered by Beijing ETS, but the company may have some expansion, so some new facilities are added to the company. So this is the second situation. No matter which situation is, the benchmarking allocation method will be used for them to add some allowances to the companies. And N is the allowances for new emissions, and Q means the activity level corresponding to the new emissions. And in Beijing, if the company is a manufacturer, then the activity level may be its production, its output. But we have many service sectors. So for service sector company, activity level may be their building area, because they don't have production data. And B means the benchmark for different sectors. So now I can conclude some features of Beijing ETS. Our first feature, and it's very different from EU ETS, is that we include indirect emissions from electricity consumption. Because Beijing's energy consumption structure is very unique, very different from other provinces, and also maybe it's different, it's unique in international level, because more than 2/3 of Beijing's electricity consumption is imported from power plants located in other provinces, and under the dispatch by North China Power Grid. It's a national-owned grid company. So it's very special. It's very unique. And the coverage of indirect emission from electricity consumption may also help to prevent carbon leakage from Beijing to surrounding provinces by increasing the electricity import. Because currently our electricity tariff, the price is fixed by the national government, and the grid, neither the power plants nor the grid power grid company can increase the electricity price. So that's why currently to be compatible to other policies, we have to cover the indirect emission from electricity consumption. And feature 2, you can see that we now take account into the service sectors, because after a relatively long time of sectoral restructure, the service sectors have dominant share in Beijing's GDP, currently more than 80%. So it's also very unique thing in the world. So, and from the picture in the left side, you can also see that from manufacturer sector, from the industry sector, end-use energy consumption already peaked in year 2010. So we don't have much energy conservation potential from the industries. So we take focus on the more and more service sectors. And it's very challenging that very few, neither the international experience nor data could be referred for the service sector's emission trading. And the feature 3 is that we have precondition. It's control on emissions total amount. It's a decision by the Standing Committee of Beijing Municipal People's Congress in late 2013. And this is the first year of Beijing's ETS pilot into operation formally. And so according to this regulation, several sectoral caps and emission control factors for existing companies are deduced through local binding targets for sectoral energy conservation. It's a top-down method. And also, just now I talked about our calibration of bottom-up method. And feature 4 is that we have many local benchmarks for 52 subsectors. Totally, currently we have 92 benchmarks and what we call advanced industrial CO2 emission intensities in Beijing. And these benchmarks are similar in the advanced level with EU's benchmarks. And most of the benchmarks are led by me. It's my honor. And this is the market status. You can see that the first compliant period deadline of first compliant period is in year 2014, and more than 7 years, it's the online trading status. And you can see that last year, before the deadline of surrender of the compliance, the price was suddenly high. And then the last page of what I want to say are the perspectives, because every ETS in the world would pass through the approach of learning by doing. And no matter its future trading market booms or not, Beijing ETS are useful, especially for developing countries action. And it also provides practical experience for our national ETS. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. And I'd like to thank the participants who have been entering their questions in the chat box. We will come to those after our two next speakers. So please continue to submit those, and we will also ask those after the other two presentations. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker, Francesca Manni from Enel, to share her perspective on the early implementation of the EU ETS, providing the utility perspective on this particular region's experience. Francesca, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't know if you can see my screen, my presentation, Enel Group and carbon pricing.
We can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cecilia. So good morning, and thank you in advance for your time, for your attention. Let me introduce myself. My name is Francesca Manni. I'm from Enel. I have around more than 11 years of experience in the Italian, European, and global electricity market. I'm currently working as a head of climate change and renewable energy policies in Enel. Previously, I worked for around 5 years in the competitor intelligence, market studies, and strategic analysis. Sorry, probably some noises. Sorry. Previously, I worked for 5 years in the competitor intelligence, market studies, and strategic analysis team, a department of the CEO staff of Enel Green Power. And before this experience, I worked for 6 years in the energy management of the global trading business line of Enel. And before joining Enel, I worked in the bank sector in the field of IT solutions. So thank you in advance. So let me go to the presentation of the Enel Group and the carbon pricing views on carbon pricing, ETS, and the proposed reports. What about the Enel Group today? I imagine that you can see the second chart about the Enel Group today, right? Okay, perfect, thank you. So what about the Enel Group today? The Enel Group is a global energy player active along the fuel electricity value chain. We are present in more than 30 countries all around the world. And we manage around 49 gigawatts of renewable installed capacity. And in terms of grid customer, we have around 74 million end users. And according to the latest Capital Market Day, November 2021, we sold around 130 terawatt hours of electricity. We have different global business lines. First of all, the global power generation and Enel Green Power business line that has the objective to accelerate the sustainable energy transition and increase the renewable capacity growth and the decarbonization of our fleet. With the global infrastructure and networks, we need to guarantee the reliability and the quality of the services in the energy supply, so with an efficient, resilient, and digital networks. In the meantime, we also have the optimization and the global energy commodity management in terms of the optimization of the group margin as a single portfolio. And with Enelix division, we enable the energy transition, boosting electrification, decarbonization of the customer by providing innovative services and system flexibility. And last but not least, with the retail division, the objective is to increase the customer value thanks to the commodity and beyond commodity services, also thanks to the customer satisfaction and experience improvement. What about our net zero plan by 2030? According to the latest Capital Market Day and the latest Enel Group presentation, we are bringing forward our net zero target by accelerating the customer electrification and maximizing the value and addressing the climate change and challenges. But where, when, how, and what about our milestones? So looking at the long-term and strategic decision, Enel milestone on the road to the net zero by 2030 is across the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So we need to deploy new RES capacity to have around 100% of RES fleet by 2030, according to the latest plan. And we need to exit from coal by 2027 and from gas by 2030. And also we need to exit from the gas retail by 2040 to reach 100 sales% from RES by 2030. So all the Enel CAPEX plan are fully aligned with this 2030 net zero target. So this is our long-term Enel strategic decision and the milestone to reach the net zero target by 2030. But what about Enel position on carbon pricing? Carbon pricing is one of the most effective means to reach the decarbonization. We can see different carbon price approach around the world. So the ETS, carbon tax, and different implementation for different countries. Putting a price on carbon is one of the central pillars of an effective, efficient, and credible climate policy. The carbon tax versus cap and trade debate has to carefully consider the local context, especially for what concerns political acceptability, the market structure, the policy interaction, and institutional capacity. So, first of all, in our idea, cap and trade system are generally the most efficient mechanism to reduce the emission, especially in industrialized economies, as they ensure environmental effectiveness and economic efficiency through the cost minimization. And carbon taxation, is better suited for specific contexts, including the initial phase of carbon pricing implementation, weaker institutional frameworks, sector characterized by distributed emission sources. So moving to the next slide, why we like emission trading? First of all, for the transparency. Second, for the flexibility and for the efficiency. As you know, the European emission trading system, the EU ETS, as you can see in this graph, is a cap and trade system. It was introduced in 2005 and has undergone several changes since then. The implementation of the system has been divided up into distinct trading period over time, known as phases. And what about the history of the European ETS? The Kyoto Protocol to the United Nations FCCC was agreed upon 1997 and set legally binding GHG reduction target, or caps, for more than 37 industrialized countries for the first committed period. And this led to the need for policy instruments to meet the Kyoto commitment. And this led to the adoption of the EU ETS directive in 2003 and the introduction of the EU ETS system in 2005. What about the European ETS ambition? The ambition increased following the European climate policy. We started with the 2020-20 package in 2007 with the first objective to reduce the EU ETS emission of around 21% in 2020 versus the 2005 level. Then we have the climate and energy framework. There are different noises, sorry.
Dengar suaranya ya?
Narasumber termute suaranya.
Francesca, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Sorry. I have to repeat something.
Yes, there was some noise, and then I think you muted yourself. If you could start from there.
So we are here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
I need to repeat the previous presentation for Enel carbon pricing position.
No,
okay.
It was only the last 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I need to repeat the slide.
You were halfway through this slide, I believe.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Sorry, but probably some interaction between my connection and the other colleagues. So I don't know what happens, but okay, I can restart from this slide. Thank you, Cecilia. I was explaining why Enel Group, why we like emission trading, okay? First of all, for the transparency, for the flexibility, and for the efficiency. What about the history and the ambitions of the European ETS scheme? The European ETS scheme was introduced in 2005, and it's a cap and trade system and has undergone several changes since then. The implementation of the system of the EU ETS has been divided into different phases. We have 4 phases up to date. And what about the history of the EU ETS? The Kyoto Protocol to the United Nations FCC was agreed upon 1997 and set legally binding GHG reduction target or caps for 37 industrialized countries for the first committed period. And this led to the need for policy instruments to meet the Kyoto commitment. And this led to the adoption of the EU ETS directive in 2003 and the introduction of the EU ETS in 2005. What about the ambitions of the European ETS? The ambition increased following the European climate policy. First of all, we start with the 2020-20 package, the climate framework developed in 2007, and with the ambition to reach the 21% reduction of the EU ETS emission in 2020 versus the 2005 level. Then in 2014, we had the climate and energy framework package. And the goal was to reach the 43% reduction of the European ETS emission in 2030 versus the 2005 level. Now, the last package under discussion is the Fit for 55 package, as you know. And we have the final objective to reach by 2030 the 55% reduction of the emission in 2030. And in particular, for the ETS sector, the reduction is equal to 61% of the European emission reduction in 2030 versus the 2005 level. And this is current with the European Green Deal target that has the objective to reach the net zero target neutrality by 2050. So why we like the emission trading system? As we said before, for 3 main topics. First of all, the transparency, the flexibility, and the harmonization of the system. In terms of environmental transparency, as we said before, there is a cap. The path is clear and the environmental outcome is guaranteed. Then in second, we have the technological flexibility. So there is a full flexibility to choose how to decarbonize in terms of operational versus investment decision and technological choices. Then we have the third point related to the temporal flexibility. The flexibility to choose when to decarbonize, adjusting to asset lifetimes and economic cycle. And then the economic transparencies, because there is a value for emissions about and clear to all. And while the forward curve reflects the expectation for the long term and the state of the art of the knowledge. And then last but not least, the harmonization, because it ensures a level playing field among industrial operators and through the linking across national borders. So through effective management of policy overlap, the ETS can be a central pillar of an effective wider set of climate policies. Going to the next slide, we have to talk, of course, about the managing the short-term price uncertainty. As you know, we are in a context of volatility, of prices, of commodity, of gas, of coal, of power prices, and of CO2, of course. So trading, hedging, and diversification support a utility winning strategy. And in this sense, the carbon price uncertainty may be determined by different drivers, including economics, regulatory, and weather conditions. In terms of economics, growth in the wider economic context, commodity prices, competitiveness with the European ETS sector. In terms of regulatory, we have the carbon regulatory, but also wider energy, climate, environmental policies that affect the abatement patterns. And then in terms of weather, so the temperature affects demand for heating and cooling, rainfall influence in hydroelectricity, and in the long term, wind and solar regime. So the utility strategy in managing the uncertainty may include the hedging the portfolio of forward sale in order to lock in the margin. Include also the decarbonization of the asset base, reducing exposure to the carbon price, and the diversification of the geography in order to hedge against the different drives uncertainty. With a specific focus on the latest trends in 2021 and for January 2022 in terms of commodity prices trends, so gas, coal, and power. As you know, the European gas fell under 80 euros per megawatt hour mark in the second half of January, mainly due to the higher LNG arrivals from US and milder temperature. But unfortunately, we know the crisis, the escalation in Russian and Ukrainian tensions. So this might severely impact the European supply. In terms of coal, for example, coal index started to grow again between December and January, mainly due to the expectation of a stronger European and Chinese demand. And unfortunately, moreover, Russian-Ukrainian tension may impact the European coal supply, driving price higher. And due to the current uncertainty on the commodity market, also power prices are still at high level and show strong volatility. For example, in Italy, the PUN, Prezzo Unico Nazionale, averaged at around 230 euro for megawatt hour in January, while in Spain it was at around 200 euro for megawatt hour. So in addition to the commodity dynamics, we have to consider two other factors that are supporting the prices. The first one is the low level of the hydro stock in Italy and Spain. And the second one is the maintenance of the nuclear power plant in France. Going to the CO2 price trend, to the focus to this commodity, between January 2021 and January 2022, we assist to an increased price, and increasing price levels appear to be driven by politics, regulation, and gas crunch. So they are impacted, of course, on the geopolitical context, but of course, to the commodity trends, so the gas, coal, and price, and so on. The current bullish price drivers are mainly fundamental instead of purely speculative now. And the current long-term CO2 prices drivers are, first of all, the market tightness from the reduced supply of the UA and a higher injection rate into the MSR. We have also high power sector emission, also boosted the carbon price due to the gradual coal phase out and lower French nuclear production. High gas prices support the European carbon price by outpricing fuel switching as an abatement option. And then also the upcoming market reform and an actual mid temperature overall leads to less space, heating demand, reducing the European EUA demand and prices. What about the expectation for the long term in terms of CO2 prices? Here we report a different scenario according to the different information provider expectation for the long term scenario for CO2. The expectation is consensus spiraling about 95-100 euro by 2030, while in the medium term we have different uncertainties linger in the expected 2 and 3 next year. What about the Fit for 55 package and the proposed in the European context? As we mentioned before, the European Commission launched the European Green Deal in late 2019, aiming to increase the Europeans' 2030 emission reduction target from 40% to 55% below 1990 levels. And on December 2020, the European Council reached the agreement on the higher bound 55% target by 2030 to reach the net zero target by 2050. And this is the European Green Deal. So becoming the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050 is the objective behind the European Green Deal for a sustainable green transition. As you know, the Green Deal is an integrated part of this European Commission strategy to implement the United Nations 2030 agenda and the SDG. So Europe's current strategy to deliver the bulk of emission reduction is to, first of all, prioritize the energy efficiency, the electrification of the final energy demand, transport, and heating and cooling, and the rapid phase out of coal generation. What about our position in terms of the proposed new EU ETS reform? So engaging in the policy debate, the proposed European ETS reform will contribute to the increased ambition and resilience. And within the European Fit for 55 package, Enel's key view on the revision of the EU ETS includes, let me say, 5 main topics. First of all, the ambition, because the European ETS training cap is welcome. We have an increase of the ambition that needs to be fully transparent. Second one, the market functioning, the support to the revised MSR regulation. So the mechanism plays a key role in ensuring the system resilient. 3, the scope and the support for the proposed European ETS scope expansion to the maritime and hydrogen production, but eligibility threshold for the latter need to the revision. 4, the competitiveness, because more European ETS auction revenues should be invested to support the ETS sector decarbonization. And the effectiveness and the robustness of the financial mechanism needs to be ensured. And last but not least, the just transition point. So ensure a just transition, safeguarding employment and industrial transition while avoiding unfair cost redistribution and safeguarding customer is paramount. So more focus is needed in the social dimension. Moving to the next slide, we have a specific focus for this topic related to the EU ETS and the just transition imperative, because we believe that the European ETS need to be fit for people. So it's important, the first topic, so safeguarding the industrial competitiveness, taking into account the carbon leakage issues due to the carbon price implementation. And the transition will create new jobs and industries while phasing out other jobs and other industries. The second point is safeguarding employment, focusing on reskilling and upskilling. So the social security measure should be adopted for those workers that cannot be reintegrated into the labor market. And third point, managing energy bill impacts, because policy, laws, regulations should avoid unfair cost redistribution and safeguard customers with particular attention to the low-income one. And price and non-price signals should encourage the just transition. First, let me say also the customer empowerment, because customers must be aware of both the costs and opportunities and need support in navigating the energy transition and evolving their behavior. So let me go to the, let me move to the final slide related to the conclusion. From our point of view, from Enel point of view, carbon pricing offers the opportunity to support the energy transition in a flexible and transparent way, delivering the environmental outcome and ensuring economic efficiency. The price driver short-term change, as you know, we have the volatility, but on the long term, the CAP perspective plays an increasingly important role. And the third point, the third key message for the conclusion, the utilities action involve the short to medium-term operational measure aimed at decreasing the emission and reducing the exposure. Second, the utility action involve also the medium to the long-term strategic decision, ensuring the long-term decarbonization. And the utility action involve also the stakeholder engagement to increase the effectiveness of the carbon pricing. So let me say thank you to all of you. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you to all of you that are participating to this working group. And thank you for your attention. I'm concluding my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And thank you all our three speakers for their excellent interventions, taking us through the different experiences that we've seen in Europe from the utility perspective, also the very informative insights from the Beijing trial experience and the unique features that those had outlined, and to the Indonesian context as it is today. I'd like to just introduce, we've received a number of questions for our three speakers, and I'm just going to ask each of them to respond to them one by one as we receive them. So this first question is for Pak Bayu. The question is, what about the application of carbon taxes to other industries, such as textile factories, chemical plants, ceramics, etc., which also emit greenhouse gas emissions? Will they also be subject to the carbon tax?
Bayu. Baik, terima kasih atas pertanyaannya.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you, Ms. Cecilia, for reading the question. Regarding other sectors or industries, this is a very important factor. So far, the Ministry of Energy would like a collaboration with the Ministry of Industry to discuss about the respective sectors. After we develop qualification for capacity below 100 megawatt needs specific treatment because there will be significant impact to the industry and also the society. So as we have delivered in our presentation, in 2024, so in 2023, we will do an initial trial in the sectors. We will do an introduction. So they so far are not really complying with the emission regulation. That's why we try to reorder and to develop classification and then implement it on the field. So it takes time. So at the latest 2024, we can make such achievement. That's my answer, Ms. Cecilia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your response. Our next question is to Qing Tong for a question on China. Can you please explain the impact of the implementation of the cap and trade in China? Was there really a big impact on reducing overall emissions in China? And if there is any data that you can share on the numbers before and after the application of the ETS, please?
Because Beijing ETS is previous and just a pilot for China's ETS, and currently the two ETS systems are not linked to each other. Only because now the national ETS only covered the power sector, only the power generation plants in Beijing are moved from Beijing ETS to national ETS, and others most of other companies are still inside Beijing ETS and still operated very well, and because it's only the first commitment period of China national ETS, and it's about according to some data published by MOEE, by the Ministry of Ecology and Environment of China, about more than 2,000 power plants in China, all over China, are covered by this ETS, and most of the power plants surrendered their emissions allowance, and this is the first year and of the first stage of ETS. So its main purpose is just like a whole national trial, whole national pilot for the first year. Even in the situation of COVID-19 pandemic. So currently, I think it's successful because at least every power plant know the rules and regulations and guidelines for MRV and for each technical components of ETS, and they know how to get their emissions allowance and also to surrender. And they also know how to sell or buy the CCER or some, because CCER is the, currently is the only permitted offset here in national market. So most power plants who have shortage of, who have gap of emission allowance also know how to trade CCER to lower their cost, and I think so. It's a capacity building, and also the national government organized several capacity buildings before the COVID-19 pandemic in year 2017 and 2018 and 2019, just before the 2020 pandemic. So the national government have many successful work on the construction of ETS. And also the decision is very good because they let several provinces and big cities like Beijing to construct their own pilot ETS, and the provinces and the cities are constructed their own pilot, and it shows the diversity of ETS rules, and also suitable for different pilot situation. So these are all very useful experience for the construction and operation of China ETS. And that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. Our next question is for Pak Bayu. Do power plants for their own businesses also have to fill in the data in the Apple Matrix, or is it enough in the SINAS?
Baik Bu Sisil, memang kami sekarang lagi memetakan untuk
currently we are trying to do some mapping for their own business or their own interests. Those that have been sold to the grid, to the PLN or our utility companies, we have the data, but eventually every company have to report to the GETRIC. So we want to ensure the capacity below 100 megawatt. We can see the real description on the emission that has been emitted by each company. We understand that we are archipelagic country. We have so many islands. We have our own independent power plant. So we need to have full description. And we will implement it in our cap and trade to make it efficiently. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you very much for your response. We will be coming back to our questions. I see that Paul Dawson has joined us now. Paul, I'd like to invite you to provide us your intervention and covering the perspectives around how the carbon tax that have been applied in different EU national contexts have impacted participation in the EU ETS. Paul, the floor is yours.
So yeah, I should explain. I work for RWE, which is a large electricity producer in Europe, predominantly in Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands. We produce electricity with coal and with natural gas, but increasingly are a large developer of wind resources, offshore wind, where we're, I think, second largest globally in terms of building. And carbon pricing has been integral to our transition away from burning lignite and coal into cleaner gas and increasingly into wind. The ETS is the primary driver of that in terms of setting a price per ton of carbon dioxide. And I perhaps should explain maybe some of the differences in approach and the impacts in respect of emissions trading versus taxation, because certainly in the United Kingdom we have a hybrid where we have both a carbon tax called carbon price support and now the UK emissions trading scheme layered on top of that tax. That used to be the EU emissions trading scheme when the UK was still part of the EU. It's a very similar scheme now. But in Germany, Netherlands, we're in the EU ETS. So when I talk about ETS, I'll be talking about the UK and the EU interchangeably, unless I note the specific context. And essentially, when we're generating electricity, we're looking really to sell that electricity up to 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future. I mean, we're trying to take decisions about when plants are available to generate, when maintenance outages should occur, and we're trying to plan that significantly into the future. Now, traditionally, we would have done that by selling the electricity and buying the gas or buying the coal or planning the development of the lignite mine. With the ETS, we now have an additional factor of production. So every time we sell electricity, we're not just buying the coal and the gas, we're buying the carbon dioxide certificates. And that enables us to hedge the price of carbon dioxide. But if we sell electricity 2 years forward, we buy the carbon allowances 2 years forward and lock in the margin between the electricity price and the gas price and the carbon price. And that leaves us fully hedged. It means that we can stabilize our revenues and our margins by selling out the power and buying the carbon dioxide forward. And that crucially is the difference for us between emissions trading and taxation. If that was a carbon tax, we might predict that the tax was going to be 50 euros as opposed to buying carbon allowances at 50 euros. But that tax may change. It may, the ministry may increase the tax or not increase the tax, and that wouldn't leave us hedged. So when we buy allowances, we know that when we comply in 2 years' time, we burn the gas or we burn the lignite, we know that that certificate will meet our compliance requirements, irrespective of whether the price has risen to 100 or fallen to 5. We know that we've bought that allowance forward, we've fixed the price, we've fixed our margin. With a tax, we might have sold the power forward, and then we get to the year, and instead of the tax being what we predicted it was going to be, the tax is different. And that leaves our margins at risk. It means it's unhedgeable. It means it's more expensive to generate. It's more expensive in future as we look forward with wind. The tax and all the carbon price will feed through into the price of electricity. If we can hedge that price effectively, that leads to one, cost of capital. If we can't hedge that price effectively because it's in part dependent on a tax, that will lead to a higher cost of capital to reflect the lack of ability to predict and crucially to hedge the future electricity price. So they have very different components, and we've seen very much this within the UK because we've got both in parallel. So we've been able to hedge the emissions trading part of it and hedge by UK allowances and previously EU allowances to hedge that. But we haven't been able to hedge carbon price support. Now, carbon price support was originally introduced in the UK to raise the carbon price, the total carbon price, essentially to give incentives to move out of coal into gas at a time when emissions allowance prices were very low, 5 to 10 euros. Now those emissions prices are up, they've fallen a lot in the last few days, but clearly when the prices are 80, 90 pounds as opposed to 5 or 10 pounds, the 18 pounds a tonne extra becomes more or less relevant. And that 18 pounds has been capped in the UK for the last 3 or 4 years, despite when it was originally introduced, it was meant to be part of a total carbon price. And it, would have been significantly higher than that now, had we believed what the government had initially said was going to be the trajectory for that tax. But lobbying, political pressure meant that the tax has subsequently been taxed. So had we forecast it, we'd have got it wrong. So it's a very good example, actually, of how we can hedge without knowing what the price of allowances is going to be, whether it's 80 or whether it's 8, we can stabilize our margins. Whereas with a tax, we can't, because it may double tomorrow, it could halve in the light of political pressure. So, we've actually had that live experience within the UK of both elements, one of which we can't hedge and respond to. So that's an initial taster. I don't know whether there's follow-up questions around that.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that overview. It's been very, very informative. In the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass to my colleague, Pak Bayu, to go into the next session, to have some reactions from our Indonesian colleagues. And then we will go back to the questions that have been submitted to us and also have opportunities to ask Paul questions as well, and Francesca. Pak Bati, over to you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Baik, Bapak Ibu. Jadi di sesi selanjutnya.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in our second session, we will be more active in this discussion. Please ask a direct question or please share your comments. We are inviting you to do the session in Indonesian language, and there will be opportunity for all of us to raise question in Indonesian language or in English. And initially, I would like to invite our partners from government or from PLN or our utility companies. And we would like to invite PLN or the government to grasp lessons learned from today's resource speakers. We would like to invite the ministries or DG Electricity or from BKF or the fiscal agency and also from PLN. Anyone who'd like to ask a direct question? Is there any question? Or from PLN or the utility companies?
Ya, silakan Mbak Maya.
Baik Pak,
Yes,
izin
Mbak Maya,
Pak Bayu.
okay, Pak Wanhar and Pak Bayu, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm interested in what was already said about ETS and indirect emission. Probably you can explain it further in terms of how we can set the value or the threshold if we have indirect emission, whether it will be combined or separated related to the indirect emission. And also how to avoid double counting related to indirect emission, and whether indirect emission will be applied in the China ETS, not just in Beijing ETS. Okay, I think that's it for Singtong. Okay, thank you. Ms. Singtong?
Yes. Indirect emissions are both covered by several pilot ETS and the national ETS, because national ETS are constructed based on the successful and also maybe some difficulty experience from pilot ETS, and because every country has different situation, especially in the electricity tariff, and I'm not familiar with the electricity tariff in Indonesia, and I don't know whether you can your electricity cost can be passed through, because in China the price, the tariff is fixed by national government. So currently we have to consider the indirect emission, and what you said, how to avoid double counting, shows you have very conscious and very careful consideration, and it's a good question. And but here in China, there is an answer that maybe there could be some double counting between different companies' emissions allowance, but only some value it's only seen from the some value, and the responsibilities are not double counted because the power company has the responsibility to reduce their carbon intensity, and the consumers of manufacturers and even the service sector companies from Beijing pilot ETS, they have the responsibility of electricity saving, conservation, and if they don't save electricity and they waste electricity, then they will cost more, even in the carbon market. But maybe it's only the transit. It's only a transmission in current situation of China, because currently in China also there are some power market reformation. So let's see together if the power market policy change in the future, then maybe some compatible revision of the emission trading scheme will be done, and let's see together. I'm not very clear in current situation about the change of electricity tariff and some other power policies, because it's too complex and cannot be revised for 1 or 2 days in short time. So let's see together.
Apakah cukup Mbak Mayang atau masih ada klarifikasi selanjutnya?
Is that enough? Yes, probably Sintong can also about the indirect emission, because I have 3 questions and some have been answered.
Apakah bisa dielaborasi, Ms. Kingtong, about the MRV?
Excuse me, because would you please say your question about MRV again? Sorry.
Mungkin bisa diulang, Mbak Mayang.
Yeah, Mbak Mayang, can you please repeat? So how about the MRV for the indirect emission in China? Whether you have specific guidelines that you can share with us?
It's the same guideline for different emission sources, including, for example, the direct emission from energy use, the direct emission from industrial process, and also the indirect emissions from electricity consumption, and also some heat consumption. And the heat consumption are not very common, maybe not as common as the electricity consumption, but in China, almost every company is covered by the national ETS have the indirect emission of electricity consumption. Even the power plants themselves have involved in this indirect emission, because sometimes when they stop maybe they will have some sudden stop or some renovation or some cases like this. They will stop and they will also buy some electricity from the power grid, power company. So in this situation, that's also their indirect emission, because they buy electricity and they have electricity consumption from the power grid. So almost every company covered by ETS will be involved in the indirect emission, and this will not be reported individually. We have for each subsector, we have a specific MRV guideline, and in such guidelines, we will describe how to report your direct emission from energy use, from industrial process, and how to report your indirect emissions from electricity consumption, and may also from the heat consumption.
Baik Bapak Ibu, saya pikir jawaban dari Ms. Kingtong sudah.
Okay, I think the answer is already sufficient. Thank you, Ms. Kingtong. And I'd like to give opportunity to our colleagues from PLN. Maybe you would like to give comments or questions. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be comments. So you can ask the speakers, or if you would like to give comments, please feel free. Yes, okay, yes, Pak. I'd like to ask Francesca Mani about ETS in terms of the implementation. In terms of EU ETS, of 5 aspects of EU ETS, how about the revenue? Whether it's given directly to the companies or is it through the government? And also, how about the just transition? what things that companies need to prepare?
Hello, thank you for the question. If I understand the question, do you want to understand how does the ETS work? Because there were some noises and I can hear you the question, but more or less I understand that you want to understand how the EU ETS work. As we say, the European ETS is a cap and trade system that incentivize the emission reduction year over year. The ETS is a cap and trade system with the overall emissions that allowed in the system are capped, and the cap is designed to decrease annually. The level of the cap determines the number of the allowances available in the system, and each of them representing 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. And the allowances are obtained thanks to auctions or for free. For free, especially in sectors where there is the risk of carbon leakage. So free allowances, for example, are based on historical emissions and sectors benchmarks. And then the allowances are also obtained buying them from other players. For example, a player short of allowances buy allowances from one that has a surplus of allowances. And at the end of the year, the participants must return. So we have the surrender of allowances for every ton of CO2 that they emit during that year. So participants can also decide to bank allowances for use in later years. Allowances have also value because there is a limited or capped supply, and there is demand for them from those participants for whom the cost of making decisions are higher than for other participants. And such, it allows the effort to be redistributed between participants to so that emissions reduction take place in areas where it costs less. And so this is good for business and for economy. For example, if we have a factory, for example, a power plant B that does not have enough free allowances to cover its emission, so it can either comply with the cap by buying allowances from a factory, a plant A, or from the auction. And if a participant's emission of GHGs exceed the free allowances, they were given at the start of the year. So they can buy allowances from auctions or from other participants who have reduced their emission and hold surplus allowances. So participants can also decide to bank allowances for use in the later year. And in terms of just transition, what we say before is that the European ETS needs to be fit for people, for the safeguarding of the industrial competitiveness, because take into account the carbon leakage issues due to the carbon price implementation. And the EU ETS need to be fit for people for the safeguarding of the employment, focusing on reskilling and upskilling. And it's important managing the energy bill impacts and the customer empowerment. And for what concern, for example, the revenues from the auction, we can say that the European ETS auction revenue utilization is significant, and precious resources need to be better focused to support the ETS sector decarbonization. The context is that we have a significant carbon price increase, and this leads to increase in auction revenues. For example, the 97% of auction revenue spent domestically and 75% of the total revenues are used for climate and energy purpose. So well above the 50% rule set under the EU ETS directive currently in force. From our point of view, from Enel point of view, we welcome for example, the European Commission proposal, the latest proposal, of course, to invest all the revenues not attributed to the Union budget for climate-related purpose. However, more ETS auction revenues should be reinvested to support especially the decarbonization of the UTS sector. So, thank you.
Terima kasih, Francesca. Mbak.
Okay, thank you, Francesca.
Apakah pertanyaannya tadi sudah terjawab? Karena tadi di depan Francesca mungkin.
Has Francesca answered your question? Whether it is clear? Is it clear?
Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much.
Baik, terima kasih.
Thank you. Terima kasih. Baik, Bapak Ibu, saya ingin open pertanyaan. Jadi
okay, I'd like to open another question session. Please feel free to ask if you have any questions. You can raise your hands. I have Pak Agus Rusli. Okay, Pak Agus. Okay, so would you like to ask? Yes, Pak Agus.
Pak Agus masih mute.
Pak Agus, you are muted.
Halo, Pak Agus, kami belum.
Hello, Pak Agus. We cannot hear you.
Ya, sebentar. Apakah Pak Agus, apakah bisa unmute?
Pak Agus, can you please unmute yourself? Okay. Let's just continue to Pak Alihudin. Pak Alihudin, please. Okay, thank you very much. I would ask actually to the speakers. I would like to ask Pak Bati. So, what is the final target of OECD in Indonesia? Okay, that's the first one. The second one. I'm interested. I'll be interested if, say, for example, if you can explain about the implementation in the countries. So I'd like to know whether they would like to trade carbon or emission in Indonesia. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so actually, I think Cecilia is the right person to respond to this. So what is the what are the objectives of OECD for having this event? But this one is like a general objectives because we work with our partners from the directorates, and the results, the findings of these sessions will be reported and will be submitted to the directorates. So Cecilia, I think, can respond to this, but our main objective is how we can work with our colleagues in DJK and how we can reduce our CO2 emission.
Jalannya adalah melalui
and this is through ETS. Probably Pak Wanhar can help, or Pak Bayu. Maybe you can help explaining this. Okay, Pak Alihudin. Okay, I think you would like to ask me, but it's going through Pak Bati first. Okay. Okay, Pak Bati and Ibu Cecilia already explained about this actually, because we already agreed that we already agreed in terms of the power plant for this emission reduction, right? But we don't have the experience, right? Yeah, Francesca already mentioned this in the 1990s. They already started. So through CFIM, so actually we'd like to learn, but we're running out of time. We would like to finalize our minister's decree, right? Would like to know our stakeholders' opinion, especially from the power plant, whether they already know about this. Okay, I think that's all. There's no other things, Pa Ali. But if, say, for example, the link to Europe, to the European Union or England or Asia or Singapore, then please, it is in the hand of the leaders, because Singapore and Malaysia have submitted their offers, but we still decline their offers. We'd like to settle first.
Peluangnya nggak apa-apa, asal harganya udah setara Pak Ali. Kalau sekarang kan kita masih $2.
At the moment, the pricing is $2. In Europe, some other countries have put price hundreds of euro, perhaps. But while we are having a discussion, Mr. Bati, yes, please, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in an ongoing discussion to set up the ministerial regulation. In the EU or in the UK, they do the stages very gradually. Several phases for the carbon trading, and then they would like to reduce their allowance. And then they try to apply tax. As for Indonesia, we are quite surprised that the government have determined that the ETS and the carbon tax to run hand in hand or in parallel. So perhaps Francesca or anyone here can give some input, because we haven't done our ETS so far, but now we need to do this in parallel. And regarding Mr. Paul Dawson's presentation, do you think tax can be determined, say, certain percentage of the deficit of the emission? Because we have a discourse that we will determine a certain percentage of deficit to become tax. But our concept for cap and trade and tax is allowing the business actors to conduct carbon trading or to do carbon offset. But the excess that cannot be fulfilled based on those allowance can be taxed. But everything is still under discussion. So I would like to ask further question to Mr. Paul. Do you think you have some insight for Indonesia? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm not quite sure how the tax and
You're still muted, Paul.
I've taken. How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure on the concept that you're pursuing in Indonesia in terms of a hybrid between a tax and a trading. I suppose the point that I would make, I mean, taxes can be used in parallel to emissions trading for maybe sectors where they're not ready for emissions trading. I mean, it's one of the things we're looking at in Europe at the moment for housing and transport is a limited tax-based scheme within Germany that would migrate into becoming part of the emissions trading scheme. So it's not, you know, that they can't be used in parallel. I think the experience we've got in the UK is when they're used together for the same emissions, you can hedge emissions trading, emissions allowances in a market, and that enables you to efficiently risk manage and plan and invest. But you can't hedge a tax because it's only something you just directly pay to the government. So it's not that taxes don't have a role in signaling a price of carbon, it's just from a business perspective, they are so much less amenable to, you can predict them but get them wrong. You can engineer your business to respond to them by reducing emissions in certain areas, but then it may turn out that, you know, you forecast them wrong, or that they have an impact and they present a risk that you can't manage. Whereas emissions trading markets, you can buy and sell allowances forward in order to manage your entire portfolio of emissions. And that enables us to stabilize revenues and reduce investment costs in a way that taxes just don't. So it's just cheaper, I suppose, for us when we're looking to invest in renewable assets, when we're moving out of coal into gas assets. We know that we can lock in the margins better with a market-based approach than we can with a taxation-based approach.
Francesca? You hear us? Ya, sepertinya Francesca belum.
It seems that Francesca is not.
Halo, Francesca? Ya, mungkin.
Well, perhaps we can still continue. I saw there was Python. Python raised its hand. Yes, thank you, Pak Bati. I apologize, Mr. Wanhar. I'm Bayu from Python Energy as the electricity business actors. And I have a slight complaint because some of the information that has been proposed is actually quite abrupt. So for us who need to deliver submission for monitoring plan to conduct preparation of carbon trading, we are being in a rush. Even though we are already aware since last year, the implementing regulation that has been mentioned by Mr. Bayu, it is still ongoing, is still being formulated. I have many questions, but my question is very technical. And this is actually back to basic. So, Mr. Director, Mr. Wanhar, please allow me to send you a written letter so that you can respond those specific questions, specifically on the implementation of carbon trading and what you have conveyed previously. Why is this coinciding with carbon tax implementation? So that's not a question, but that's my comment. Thank you, Mr. Bati and Mr. Wanhar. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Or Pak Wanhar can respond to the question. Yes, thank you very much. Python Energy is an IPP? Yes, sir, correct. Okay. We actually want this to be done smoothly. We have designed the trial until 2024 pursuant to the government regulation number 6. So we have time for 7 years since 2017 to make it mandatory. Yet, not from the electricity director general, we're not the one who determine it. Who proposed for trial, we did that just because there will be presidential regulation regarding the economic value of carbon. To anticipate that, that's why we did our trial. the previous 2 years, we, with the IPP on market readiness, we are trying to setting the cap and also to develop the schemes. And our plan, first, it will be ETS. However, Ministry of Finance automatically grasped our trial and considered to implement carbon tax. Presidential Regulation number 8 called it as levy or levy. So Mr. Bayu, I apologize. This is actually the decision of our leadership under the presidential regulation, and the presidential regulation and law on taxation is mandatory, needs to be known, acknowledged, and conducted by the business actors. During our trial, we did correspondence, and suddenly, on the D-Day, Python Energy was not participating in the trial. So apologize for rushing your company, but the preparation sequence is already has been long ongoing. And the decision of the government seems to be in parallel because the government wants to show to the world that we are actually ready. We have done the long process, and the right moment to conduct it is in 2021. So if you are facing some technical issues, you can contact us in DG Electricity or contact Bumayang. Thank you so much, Pak Bati. Yes, thank you, Mr. Wanhar. Yes. Let us continue to respond the question of Mr. Joko Prihatno. Thank you very much. Sorry for being late in following the presentation from Francesca. We would like to have further elaboration from European ETS. After there is CMA3 for market and non-market, specifically for market 6.2, cooperation between government to improve the ambitions so that we can share the result to the foreign market. And then 6.4 is the new investment that will be conducted between private sector with the agreement of the government. Can you further elaborate? Because you already have ETS for quite time. After the CMA3 decision, where will you conduct the pretest? Whether you apply both of them, combination, old ETS, and there's a cooperation agreement, or will you have a different priority regarding the European emission? Thank you, Mr. Joko. Francesca, can you respond to that question?
Still motive, Francesca? Or maybe Paul? Hello, Francesca? Or maybe Paul, you can give intervention?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely clear what the question was. It to what extent has the EU got plans to accommodate the Article 6 provisions? Is that correct?
Pak Joko, mungkin bisa diulang dengan lebih singkat, Pak.
Baik. Jadi dengan diputuskan.
I would like to repeat the decision of Article 6 whether the existing ETS in Europe will only apply Article 6, or will you apply both articles and the ongoing or existing scheme of ETS?
Well, I'm not aware of any plans to allow the use of international offsets within the ETS. This is somewhat unfortunate. I mean, to some extent, the CDM became the victim of its own success, and within the EU got sort of blamed for an excess of allowances and prices not being seen as sufficiently high. I mean, the reality, of course, was that while CERs were allowed in the EU, they were the source of huge amounts of investment. The demand from the EU drove, the development of significant project activity that was very useful. And the closure of that option within the ETS has correspondingly led to that effort stalling. So certainly up to 2030, I don't think there's any plans to include offsets. Beyond that, there's no plans, but I would expect at some point, in line with net zero, that you're going to struggle to get there without international linkage. And I think just from a climate leadership perspective, it would be great to see the EU, the UK and others engaging a lot more on how the Article 6 provisions do work and how we can spread emissions trading much more widely, because I think there's huge benefits there in terms of both the demand for abatement, but also the sharing of technologies and the joint working, but also the EU's working on things like carbon border adjustments, which are to deal with leakage that wouldn't happen if other countries were engaged in carbon pricing and trading and the like, to level the playing field there. So no immediate plans that I'm aware of, but I think it would be good to see those mechanisms reintroduced, and carbon pricing and linkage of carbon markets extended further.
Baik, thank you, Pak Paul. Bapak Ibu sekalian, sebenarnya
distinguished ladies and gentlemen, actually our time is only another 10 minutes, but I would like to invite you to share your input, because next month perhaps there will be our 4th FGD, and perhaps you would like to propose some topics, or Indonesian stakeholders would like to discuss about certain point, and we would like to emphasize it in our future FGD. Perhaps you would like to share with us. Thank you so much.
Apakah ada masukan dari kementerian, baik itu SDM atau yang lain?
Ministry of Energy or other ministry, we would like to invite you to share your proposal.
Okay, do you have any inputs?
Tidak ada masukan. Kemudian mungkin saya karena waktu juga.
If you don't have any inputs, then probably from AWE can give a closing statement.
Hello. Thank you very much, Pak Pati.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I see some hands are raised, but I think that those are old hands, right?
Yeah.
Pak Pati, okay.
I think so.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I'm not going to take too much time, since we're really almost at the end of the time that we had planned. And I know that there were probably more questions for the speakers and the presenters that we saw coming. So hopefully we can make sure that we have some exchange going forward. I really just wanted to thank Pak Wanhar, Pak Bayu, and the whole team at DGCAL for this exchange, which we hope is useful. There was a question about what the purpose of this FGD was from the OECD perspective. Certainly from the IA perspective, it's really just to be helpful, be useful when we heard specific questions that were being discussed in the Indonesian context. Given we're international organizations that work across a lot of different countries, we thought it's useful for us to try and bring some experience and bring people in who can perhaps respond to certain questions or share experience with how things have been implemented. And we have now quite a lot of countries and quite a lot of experiences. And I think how our colleague Jing Tong mentioned in terms of the Beijing pilot, we have lots of experiences even in China over many years now with piloting and transitioning to national systems. So hopefully our aim is to bring elements, to bring responses, to bring experiences that are helpful. As we hear, there's a lot of activity right now. There's so much hard work, which I think is very inspiring to see on trying to develop these regulations, on trying to balance different requests, on trying to implement parallel processes, and a lot of stakeholders to manage. And these are all very complicated and issues. And I think it's very impressive and inspiring to see how much everyone is working together on this. And I think everyone wishes you a lot of success. Indonesia is a very important country. It's a very big country. It's a big example for many other countries. So I think it is in our collective interest for everyone to help you and to help you implement this important policy. And as Pak Bati mentioned, we are looking to hold a fourth and final dialogue, and looking forward to hearing, as we have in the previous dialogues, a sense of what would be interesting to explore, what are experiences you would like to hear and examine. And so we look forward to discussing that. There will also be a report that will be produced that will summarize and try and synthesize a lot of the lessons and insights from across the 4 FGD sessions, which will also be available for everybody. So we hope that will also be useful to you. And I really found this session very interesting. I always find it very interesting to hear about the experience from the Indonesian pilot, and also the experiences we've heard from other speakers. And I do think, hopefully that they are useful. And I think it was helpful to hear about what helps participants in an ETS, and what kind of policy guidance and direction is helpful in terms of understanding what is expected of them, having certainty, and being able to manage risks, and what those things are might not be obvious. And so it's good to hear how people experience that. So I don't have much more to add, except to say a very, very big thank you for everybody's time. I think it was very impressive also to see the participation and the active questions and interaction and engagement and interest. And we hope this will continue in our next FGD. And a good evening to most of you, and a good day to others.
Baik, terima kasih Sarah atas closing remarks-nya. Bapak Ibu sekalian, terima kasih banyak atas.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the closing remarks. Thank you very much for your participation in joining us this morning. Really sorry if we have very limited time and we cannot answer or respond to all of your questions and comments, but feel free if you would like to ask us through email. You can ask through OECD or DJK. Please feel free to do that. We will meet again, hopefully next month, for further discussion for the 4th FGD with all of you. From the Director General Electricity. Maybe you have the final remarks, Pak Wanhar, before we close the session? Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Very sorry for any mistakes. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam hormat Pak Anton.
Thank you very much for coming, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Pak Bayu.
Pak Ria.
Thank you, everyone.